Key targets in Iran have been attacked this morning as the president makes new threats if the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened by the deadline tonight. Our Eric Wong live in the newsroom with the very latest on this developing story. Eric.
Good morning. The president calling tonight's deadline of 7 o'clock Chicago time one of the most important moments in world history.
The U.S. launched a new round of attacks today inside Iran, hitting several key military and economic targets.
Hello, guys. Welcome. Sophia's here. So this is massive. Over 100 members of Congress have now publicly called for Trump to leave the presidency through resignation, impeachment, or the 25th Amendment. This isn't fringe noise. It's a significant block of elected representatives declaring him unfit to serve. What makes this moment unprecedented in American history is not simply that some members of Congress oppose the president or disagree with his policies. Opposition is normal. Disagreement is expected. What makes this moment unprecedented is that over 100 lawmakers have moved beyond policy criticism into the territory of removal, filing formal articles of impeachment that accuse the president of conduct so severe that it threatens the continued existence of democratic governance itself.
Introducing articles of impeachment against the president. The congressional chamber has to act on that resolution in 2 legislative days. Green says he wants a yay or nay vote on the articles. However, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi does have other options. It could be tabled, referred to the Judiciary Committee, or essentially ignored. Even if the Democratic-controlled House passes the resolution against President Trump, it would still fall to the Senate to vote on impeachment, and the Senate is controlled by Republicans. For more on this story and an exclusive interview with the 4 congresswomen targeted by President Trump's tweets, stay tuned to CBS This Morning beginning at 7, right after News 8 at sunrise.
These are not vague expressions of concern. These are specific, documented, legally framed charges that use language the founders would have recognized as describing exactly what they designed the impeachment power to address. The president stands accused by his own colleagues in the People's House of Tyranny of pushing the nation toward authoritarianism, of actively working to dissolve the republic he swore to preserve and protect. Representative Al Green has become the face of this persistent accountability effort, filing impeachment resolution after impeachment resolution throughout this year with a determination that refuses to be discouraged by procedural defeat. He introduced his comprehensive articles in the spring, a 7-count indictment of presidential misconduct that reads like a prosecutor's closing argument against the entire Trump presidency.
Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. And I rise today in the name of government of the people, by the people, for the people. I rise today because our country is nearing a moment of decision. I rise because we are at the intersection of democracy and autocracy.
Obstruction of justice forms the first charge, alleging that the president interfered with investigations designed to hold him accountable. Usurping Congress's power of the purse forms the second, accusing him of spending money without legislative authorization in direct violation of the separation of powers. Abuse of trade and war powers comes third, targeting his tariff policies and military decisions as unconstitutional overreach.
My 7 articles in House Resolution 353 are as follows. Number 1, obstruction of justice and abuse of executive powers. Trump denied due process and defied federal court orders. Seizing Congress's power of the purse, he froze funds and dismantled agencies without congressional approval. Abuse of trade powers and international aggression. His reckless tariffs hurt American families, and he even threatened military actions against our allies.
The word appears in the formal impeachment resolution as an official charge against the sitting president of the United States. This is not campaign rhetoric or cable news hyperbole. This is a member of Congress filing a legal document that accuses the president of the exact evil the American Revolution was fought to escape. The founders designed separated powers, federalism, the Bill of Rights, the impeachment mechanism itself, all to prevent tyranny from taking root in American soil. To formally charge a president with tyranny is to declare that all those safeguards have failed and only removal remains as remedy.
Number 4, violation of First Amendment rights. Trump retaliated against journalists and critics for speaking out. Number 5, creation of an unlawful office. He gave Elon Musk unconstitutional control over government agencies and American people's personal data. Bribery and corruption. Trump dismissed criminal cases and accepted foreign payments for personal gain. Number 7, tyrannical overreach. His actions reveal a dangerous attempt to consolidate unchecked power.
The resolution explicitly states that these high crimes warrant impeachment and trial and removal from office, leaving no ambiguity about what its authors seek. They are demanding the termination of Trump's presidency. Green did not stop with that spring filing. As summer arrived and new controversies erupted, he introduced another resolution focused specifically on Trump's alleged abuse of war powers and what the resolution describes as efforts to devolve American democracy into authoritarianism. That phrase, devolve democracy into authoritarianism, represents a formal congressional accusation that the president is actively working to transform the American system of government into something fundamentally different and fundamentally threatening. The resolution was laid on the table by the Republican majority, killed procedurally without a substantive debate on whether the president was indeed attempting to establish authoritarian rule. The charges were too serious to be engaged with seriously, so they were disposed of through parliamentary maneuver. Then came December, and with it the most dire language yet. Following new clashes over court defiance and violent rhetoric, Green filed yet another impeachment resolution that asserts something genuinely terrifying. The resolution states on its face that Trump will continue to promote violence, engender invidious hate, undermine democracy, and dissolve the republic if left in office. Dissolve the republic. Those words, written into an official congressional document by a sitting member of Congress, accuse the President of the United States of being an existential threat to the continued existence of American democratic government. This is the most serious accusation that can be leveled against any public official in a democracy, and it has now been leveled formally and repeatedly against Donald Trump. The vote that followed this December filing revealed both the strength and the limitation of the accountability movement. 140 members of the House of Representatives voted to advance the impeachment articles. That number demands contemplation. It represents nearly a third of the entire House, a substantial block of lawmakers who looked at the evidence and concluded that impeachment proceedings should move forward. In any previous era of American politics, 140 votes for impeachment would have triggered a national crisis, would have dominated news coverage for weeks, would have created irresistible pressure on the president's party to at least engage with the substance of the charges. But the resolution was tabled anyway. The Republican majority killed it through procedural motion, refusing to allow a substantive vote on whether the president was promoting violence and working to dissolve the republic. The charges were simply too serious to be debated. Beyond the formal impeachment filings, the broader call for Trump's departure has reached numbers that would have ended any previous presidency. Tracking organizations have documented that more than 120 members of the House and at least 7 senators have publicly stated that Trump should resign. These are not whispers in private conversations or anonymous quotes to reporters. These are elected officials standing before cameras, giving floor speeches, holding press conferences, and saying in plain, unmistakable language that the President of the United States should step down from office because he is unfit to continue serving. Some have invoked the 25th Amendment as an alternative path, arguing that the cabinet and vice president should declare the president unable to discharge his duties. But resignation is the clearest demand, the simplest statement that continued service is incompatible with the nation's well-being. The bipartisan nature of these calls, while heavily weighted toward Democrats, includes voices from across the political spectrum. Independent members have joined the chorus. A handful of Republicans, recognizing that something fundamental has changed, have added their voices to the demand for Trump's departure. This is not a purely partisan exercise, though partisanship certainly shapes its contours. This is a genuine expression of institutional alarm from elected representatives who have concluded that the president represents a threat that normal political processes cannot address. They are using the tools available to them: formal resolutions, public statements, press conferences, floor speeches, but they are running into the hard reality that tools require votes to function, and the votes are not there. The 25th Amendment discussions that have emerged alongside impeachment and resignation demands reflect the search for any viable mechanism to achieve removal. Unlike impeachment, which requires congressional votes, the 25th Amendment provides a path through the executive branch itself. The vice president and a majority of cabinet secretaries can declare the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, triggering immediate transfer of power. If the president disputes the declaration, Congress resolves the dispute with a 2/3 vote in both chambers. The mechanism exists for genuine emergencies when the president cannot function but refuses to acknowledge incapacity. But the cabinet is filled with Trump loyalists appointed precisely because their loyalty was assured. The vice president owes his position and his political future to Trump's continued favor. The 25th Amendment path remains politically unrealistic, even as lawmakers publicly suggest it should be considered. The pattern that has developed throughout this year is consistent and revealing. Impeachment articles are filed with increasingly serious charges. The support for those articles grows, reaching 140 votes in the most recent tally. The language of the charges escalates from obstruction and abuse to tyranny and the dissolution of the republic. And every single time, the Republican majority kills the effort through procedural motion, refusing to engage with the substance of the charges, refusing to debate whether the president is indeed doing what the articles accuse him of doing. The result is a strange limbo where the president faces the most serious accusations that can be made against a public official backed by a substantial portion of the legislative branch, and yet remains in office with full powers because the party that controls the chamber has decided that accountability is less important than loyalty. This disconnect between the seriousness of the charges and the absence of consequences raises profound questions about the health of American democratic institutions. The impeachment power was written into the Constitution because the founders understood that presidents might need to be removed between elections. They did not assume all presidents would be virtuous. They created a mechanism for removal precisely because they anticipated presidents who would abuse power, who would threaten liberty, who would place themselves above the law. The question that this year's events forces upon the nation is whether that mechanism can still function when one party decides that protecting its president matters more than upholding its constitutional responsibilities. The political context surrounding these impeachment efforts adds layers of significance to what might otherwise seem like routine partisan conflict. Trump's public approval has reached new lows, with polls showing Americans increasingly concerned about economic conditions, about affordability, about the direction of the country. A politically weak president facing multiple impeachment filings and calls for resignation from over 100 lawmakers would, in normal times, be a president facing an existential political crisis. But these are not normal times, and the political weakness that would destroy any other president coexists with continued Republican protection that prevents that weakness from translating into actual consequences. The constitutional crisis that commentators have been warning about is not a dramatic single event. It is the slow accumulation of evidence that the system's safeguards are not functioning as designed. when a president can be formally accused of tyranny by members of Congress, when over 100 lawmakers can demand his removal, when nearly a third of the House can vote to advance impeachment, and none of it produces consequences, the system is revealing its limitations. The founders assumed that members of Congress would take their institutional responsibilities seriously, that they would police the executive branch regardless of party affiliation, that the impeachment power would function as a genuine check on presidential misconduct. The current Congress is proving those assumptions wrong. The normalization of impeachment talk carries its own dangers. When impeachment becomes routine, when articles are filed multiple times in a single year, when the charges escalate to tyranny and dissolution of the republic, and the response is always procedural dismissal, impeachment itself loses its power as a deterrent. Future presidents will observe what happened and draw conclusions. They will learn that if their party controls Congress, impeachment is off the table regardless of what they do. They will learn that serious accusations can be ignored if the political math favors inaction. They will learn that the constitutional check on presidential power is only as strong as the willingness of the president's party to use it, and that willingness has proven non-existent. The 2026 implications of this dynamic will shape American politics for years to come. Democrats are betting that voters will punish Republicans for blocking accountability, that the spectacle of a president accused of tyranny being protected by his party will motivate voters to change the composition of Congress. Republicans are betting that their base voters see the impeachment efforts as partisan attacks that justify protection, that loyalty to Trump remains the dominant political imperative, that accountability is less important to voters than tribal victory. The election will test which bet is correct, and the outcome will determine whether the current accountability failure is a temporary condition that voters can correct or a permanent feature of a political system where party loyalty has completely replaced institutional responsibility. The resignation calls that have attracted over 120 House members and multiple senators represent a particularly interesting dimension of this crisis. Resignation is not a constitutional mechanism. It is a political act, a voluntary decision by a president that the costs of remaining in office outweigh the benefits. By calling for resignation, lawmakers are attempting to create those costs, to build public pressure to a level where even a president known for never backing down might conclude that departure serves his interests. But Trump has demonstrated throughout his career that he does not respond to traditional pressure. Shame does not move him. Public condemnation does not move him. The opinion of colleagues does not move him. The resignation calls are an expression of institutional alarm, but they are also an acknowledgement of institutional weakness, an admission that the formal mechanisms for removal are blocked and only voluntary departure remains as a possibility. The repeated filing pattern that Al Green has established serves multiple purposes beyond the immediate goal of removal. Each filing documents specific conduct in the formal congressional record. Each filing creates a historical account of what the president was accused of and when. Each filing builds the evidentiary record that future Congresses, future prosecutors, and future historians will examine. Even if the filings fail to produce removal in the current Congress, they preserve the charges in official form for future action. The persistence itself is a form of accountability, a refusal to let the charges disappear through inattention or normalization. Green is ensuring that the accusations remain visible, remain documented, remain available for the moment when political conditions might shift enough to allow them to proceed. The party over country problem that underlies this entire situation is the fundamental challenge facing American democracy. The impeachment power can only function if members of Congress are willing to use it against presidents of their own party. The founders did not design a system that assumed virtue. They designed a system that assumed ambition would check ambition, that institutional loyalty would sometimes override partisan loyalty, that members of Congress would see themselves as legislators first and partisans second. The current Republican majority has demonstrated that this assumption does not hold. Party loyalty trumps institutional responsibility every time. The president can be accused of tyranny by his own colleagues, and the response from his party is not to investigate the charges, but to table them without discussion. The danger of this precedent extends far beyond Trump himself. Once it is established that a president whose party controls Congress cannot be impeached regardless of conduct, the deterrent effect of impeachment disappears entirely. Future presidents of both parties will understand that the only real check on their power is electoral, that between elections, they can act with impunity as long as their party maintains control of the House. This transforms the presidency from a constitutionally constrained office into an electorally constrained one, and elections happen only every 4 years, while presidential misconduct can happen every day. The gap between what the Constitution provides and what the political system delivers has never been wider or more dangerous. The what happens next question hangs over everything. The current pattern is unsustainable in the long term. A president cannot face repeated impeachment filings and calls for resignation from over 100 lawmakers indefinitely without something eventually giving way. Either the political dynamics shift through elections that change the composition of Congress, or the conduct that triggers the impeachment efforts escalates to a point where even party loyalty cannot protect the president, or the current standoff simply continues until the president's term expires naturally, and the question of removal becomes moot. Each of these possible resolutions carries different implications for the future of American governance, and none of them is clearly more likely than the others at this moment. The bottom line stands with uncomfortable clarity. More than 100 members of the United States Congress have gone on the public record demanding that Donald Trump leave the presidency through resignation, impeachment, or invocation of the 25th Amendment. Representative Al Green has filed multiple impeachment resolutions throughout the year, charging Trump with obstruction of justice, abuse of power, violation of due process, creation of unlawful offices, bribery and corruption, and tyranny, with the most recent resolution explicitly stating that Trump will continue to promote violence, engender invidious hate, undermine democracy, and dissolve the republic if left in office. 140 members of the House voted to advance these articles, nearly a third of the chamber, but the Republican majority tabled the resolution through procedural motion, refusing to allow a substantive vote on whether the president is indeed dissolving the republic. More than 120 House members and at least 7 senators have publicly called for Trump's resignation, demands that he has completely ignored because he knows they lack enforcement power. The 25th Amendment path remains blocked by a cabinet of loyalists who will never act against the president who appointed them. The pattern is consistent and devastating. Escalating accusations, growing support for removal, continued Republican protection, and zero consequences for the president. The impeachment mechanism designed by the founders to remove dangerous presidents has failed because one party has chosen loyalty over institutional responsibility. And the message that sends to this president and all future presidents is that if your party controls Congress, you can be accused of tyranny by over 100 of your colleagues and remain in office with full presidential power because accountability no longer exists for presidents protected by their own party.